Well, we're going to go ahead and get ourselves launched into this fascinating conversation, this webinar on inclusive education in the artificial intelligence era, supporting students with special needs in 2023 and 24 and beyond. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joseph Pearson. I am honored to be the professional development specialist for Moreland University, where our mission is teaching teachers around the world to be resourceful problem solvers and tech-savvy educators through an online collaborative activity-based learning system designed for tomorrow's students in a dynamic and diverse world. We live into that mission and we serve teachers around the globe through our nationally accredited online teacher certification programs, our master's degrees, and our professional developments. So today we're going to have the opportunity to learn with and from the panelists that I'm going to have introduce themselves in just a moment. And we're going to go through a number of conversations. First, a conversation on educational technology and special ed. Then we're going to talk about assistive technology. And then we're going to transition into innovative tools and a discussion on artificial intelligence. I'm going to give you some additional information on our master's degree with a focus on special education, and we'll conclude with implications for teachers. Dr. Robin Harwick, take it away.
Thanks. Hi, as Joey said, I'm Dr. Robin Harwick. I wear many hats, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all today. I am the founder and director of the Pearl Remote Democratic High School. So we lean heavily into the use of technology. About 64% of my students identify as neurodivergent. And so, thinking about how we can use this technology to help our students overcome challenges and barriers is key to what I do. I also teach in several of the master's programs here at Moreland. In addition, I'm a research scientist. I'm talking to you today from Querétaro, Mexico. And my doctorate is in secondary special education and transition. So I have a master's in early intervention and work every day with teenagers.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you, Robin. Now we're going to have a moment to hear from Dr. Lynn Beal, who happens to also be our Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. So, yes, my name is Lynn Beal, and I am the Director of Curriculum Instruction here at Moreland, which means I put my fingers in all the curriculum, and I get really excited about that. But I have to be honest, and I have to reveal something tonight. My real passion is special education. I have been a real advocate for special education for about 15 years in the K through 12 public education systems within the United States. And I've taught at numerous universities, and that's just where my heart and my passion lie. And that is why I'm here tonight, is to share anything I can about special education, my experiences, my knowledge, as well as answer any questions moving forward about our special education master's degree. So thank you so much, Joey.
It's an honor to have you, and thanks for staying on after a full day of working to serve our candidates and our community now at 7 p.m. your time to engage in this discussion. And then last, definitely not least, Dr. Jessica Blas, who is joining us. And I'd like to invite you, Dr. Jessica, to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, I'm here in Germany. It's 1 a.m. Yes, and I do have my doctorates in digital transformation, my master's in reading, and my passion is same as Lynn in special education. I have been a special education teacher. This is I'm finishing my 9th year, and I can't wait to hear from all of you guys.
Well, thank you for staying up so late or getting up so early, depending on how you look at things, to be with us. The folks that you see on your screen today are going to lead us in a discussion on best practices and strategies to support students with special needs in the changing environment of educational technology. And we're going to connect ways educators can use these practices to create an inclusive learning environment. We're also going to provide some information on our master's degree with special education program so that you understand what's available to you, both as community members of Moreland University and as folks considering enrolling with Moreland University. Based on what we have noticed in our cohorts here at Moreland and within our own classrooms, what are some innovative ways educators can use emerging educational technology to support students with special needs? Lynn, would you mind starting us off today? And then everyone else, Jessica and Robin, please don't wait for me. You all take this conversation. I'm only going to try and keep us oriented toward the conversational sort of markers, these discussion questions, but I may just let it go where it needs to go so that we can have the meaningful discussion that needs to happen. Lynn, take it away.
Thank you so much. So when I think about the innovative ways and I think about the needs of our society today in our classroom, I think of this wonderful commercial that I saw. It was a great example of how we can use technology. And it was a commercial about a young boy who was having a conversation online with another person, and they provided a facial expression, but the young boy had autism and he couldn't interpret what that facial expression meant. And in today's technology, we have the capacity to use technology that provides a response to what that facial expression meant in terms of words and or an emoji that the child was able to become familiar with. And so we can teach social emotional learning, we can teach emotional management, we can teach relationship skills. I mean, these are the most basic elements of human relationships that we have to know. And this is a fantastic way in which we can integrate technology into the classroom and into our everyday lives. When we think about being able to just communicate with others, of course, we have our speech to text and we have our text to speech. That's basic communication. There's also apps, and my translanguaging folks will love this. There's apps that do immediate translations and can translate for you as you're going along in that conversation. So just that pure relationship building and communication technology, I think is really the most important thing for us to focus on right now. And it's the most beneficial for our students at this time. That's really what I'm seeing as kind of the most innovative ways that I haven't seen before. Certainly we can talk about platforms and we can talk about presentation tools. And my gosh, if our Moreland students don't know about, putting videos together, then I don't know what happened there. But that was certainly my most favorite innovative way that I have seen that used.
I'd like to jump in. I'm glad that you mentioned communication, because I think that's a really important piece. And what I see with the technologies is it is really providing different ways to communicate and to really be fully inclusive. One of the things that I see in our online school is for many students with autism, there's a lot of fatigue from having to mask all day. Same with our students with ADHD. And so some of the things that we're seeing is really getting to having spaces where they can communicate in a way that's comfortable for them instead of always having to comply with the societal expectations as the norm. And so things like our students with autism that prefer to be as part of the discussion in the chat instead of communicating orally, preferring to write on the whiteboard that's shared rather than oral communication. It feels safer for them. For our students with ADHD who have been in traditional schools and they often felt othered because they needed to move and they needed to be, in motion, they needed to dribble a ball, they needed to do these kind of things. And that's like a physical need, right? We need to move. In fact, thinking about normalizing it, how we all really need to move a lot more. They say sitting is the new smoking, right? We shouldn't be sitting all day. And yet we're asking kids to sit all day and then they get in trouble if they don't. So with the technology, they're able to, again, have camera off. They can dribble a ball and be part of the class conversation. Maybe that's what they need to attend. Maybe they need to doodle. Maybe they need to have fidget spinners and those kind of things. But all of that makes them feel uncomfortable and teachers say is a distraction dissolves in some of these virtual spaces. And then I'm also really excited about the use of augmented reality and virtual reality for students who may have physical disabilities that prevent them from being able to go out and do water quality sampling and those kind of things, be able to get up into the mountains. And I think some of this emerging technology is really cool.
I could jump into with the whole having the students be more engaged in their learning, how you're saying fidgets and things like that. I know we talk about gamification in one of our modules, so I like incorporating gamification. I utilize Moby Max with my students. They're given like game-based activities, and these are Common Core state standards aligned. It's aligned to the CCSS, so students don't even know that they're learning, they're just having fun with these games. So that's one way to keep them active and engaged in their learning. And then back to the whole them communicating with each other, utilizing Padlet, they could create presentations together. Everyone could put their inputs in the Padlet. So those are great ways for teachers to use.
Yeah, and if we think about it, when we're looking at that science perspective, or we're looking at that special education perspective, one of the most important elements that technology has given us is the ability to instantly collect data, instantly make sense of the data, instantly provide modifications of increasing rigor or increasing scaffolding or reteaching, and really being able to give us the information that we need in special education, especially when we look at IEPs and special individualized programs for students, and being able to use that data. And that's what technology has given to us. Before, yeah, we could enter the data in a spreadsheet and we could go through it, but now we don't have to. It's right there for us and we can move forward with it.
Well, and as we think about that data, and I'd love to go immediately back to you all, I wonder, what are we doing to ensure that we aren't inundated and unable to effectively leverage and use that data to support students? How are we ensuring that the data isn't taking over, but in fact is empowering not only the educators, but the students themselves to lead learning and to make the changes and adjustments that are going to lead to their own success?
That is such a great question. And it goes to making sure that our goals are personally meaningful and culturally relevant, right? So what is the learning objective? Is it our goal? Is it the student's goal? Is it the family goal? Thinking about those learning goals and making sure that they're meaningful and relevant to that student. And then knowing that the type of data we're collecting will give us actionable. This is what I talk about in my cohort a lot. Is this actionable? So even the get to know you survey, are you just being nosy? Or is this information going to actually give you data that you can use in your instruction or use to plan modifications and accommodations, right? And I think that that's one way that we can keep it from just being a massive amount of data coming at us. Thinking very mindfully about, is this data that I can use? How can I use this? What am I going to do with this piece of information? Because otherwise, as you said, it's just a lot of data. And as a research scientist, this is one of the things I prefer applied research for this reason, because decades ago, I was on a research study and I said, so what are we going to do with this? And they said, nothing, is just cool to find out. I mean, like somebody might read these papers someday. So, okay, fair enough. But if we're not going to do anything with it, why are we spending this time collecting this data? And I think that that is where people go it's kind of misleading for the teams, because people are sitting around the table and they're talking about all this data, but they're talking about it problem focused instead of solution focused. And this is the shift. Once you have the data that has identified those challenges for the students, then you need to collect data that's going to help you move towards a solution. You don't need more data that's going to keep you focused on the problem, because that's not the goal.
Okay, so with the data collection and the tracking, it's great that it's also shared with parents. Some of these platforms could be shared with parents. So I know, unfortunately, we only have IEPs annually, unless parents ask for the IEP meeting. So they're not, once they're seeing the track throughout the school year, they're not surprised with our IEP goals and what we present to them. So I think that's great data tracking.
When I'd like to take a step backwards and say, okay, we're looking at students who have special needs, and we're talking about data, and we're talking about IEPs, but we have to remember that they were found eligible for special education based upon data, based upon testing, and based upon statistical differences between where a student should be and where they are in some form or realm. So for example, I'm going to give you reading as an example because I was a reading teacher and I loved reading. So if we look at a student who struggled with reading, maybe they struggled with fluency or comprehension or whatever, or a combination, decoding, and they had all these challenges and they were found eligible for special education, a specific learning disability, and reading, right? That's kind of the umbrella that we're looking at. So then a student would come to my class and I'd be like, okay, so they can read at this fluency level, right, per minute, with this number of errors that they would make per minute. And so I have this data, or they could decode these particular syllables or letters or sounds, or they could understand inferential but not comprehension, or whatever that data is. So I have to start with data. Before I'm even teaching, I need to know what gaps are we trying to fill. So then I use that data, and then I have specific programs. I taught a variety of programs, but I'm going to give you one as an example. I worked with a program that was a software program, and the students first began the year, obviously, with the whole assessments of determining where their strengths and weaknesses are. But more interestingly, it was, what are their areas of interest? So then they'd say they wanted to talk about spiders, which I absolutely hate. I don't know why I came up with spiders. That's okay. So they love spiders. And so what we would do is the computer then would identify specific high interest stories and informational text, so that they would either be able to have it via audio, depending on if they needed to access it and we're focusing on comprehension, or they would have to read it out loud if we're looking at that fluency, right? Or we're looking at that decoding and breaking it down. And then they would have activities that would have them actually doing things, not just reading and answering paper and pencil questions. So it's a constant access of data when we're referring to that data, constantly seeing how the student is doing. You know what, he didn't get this information correct, so let's reteach it in this way. Let's re-explore this information in this way. And then constantly using that to help build on the skills and increase the level of rigor, and hopefully closing that gap and closing that goal. So that's how I use data.
Data is power, and it allows us to be able to create classrooms that meet the needs of our students. One way that we in special education can ensure that students are receiving the support and the assistance that they deserve is to implement assistive technology. So I'd like to take us and this discussion and focus now on this important technological tool for special education, namely assistive technology. Panelists, please bring us all up to speed on assistive technologies in the classroom. What foundational information do we need as we dive into this discussion on the use of technology applications to support students with special needs?
I can piggyback on what Dr. Lynn was saying about, whether or not we need to have a read aloud, whether we're using audiobooks. Like, again, what is the goal of the instruction, and where are we trying to go with the child? And so one of the ways I see assistive technology is really, really helpful, and just having this conversation at my teachers meeting today, is what is that learning outcome? Is it a learning outcome related to writing, or is it a learning outcome related to the student being able to describe to you that they understand a concept that you have talked about in physics? And so our physics instructor gave us a great example of how he was really creative. Our student, this particular student, has a learning disability in writing. And so he said, "Can you draw it for me?" And the student said, "Oh yeah, I can draw it." And so, so this is kind of so the student was able to convey the concept, and going back to the videos, which we've already talked about. So using the videos, using audio recordings, using text to speech, all of these kind of things, so that the student can let you know that they have learned what you're trying to teach them. And I think that these are really easy ways to modify the assignments so that we know that we're able to assess what they're actually learning, because sometimes it looks like the student isn't learning much in the classroom, but they're actually learning a lot. It's the way that we're asking them to demonstrate their learning. That's the part they can't do yet. I always like to say yet. And they may be able to get there, and depending on the disability, they may not, right? So I think those are some of the kind of technologies. And I am very lucky because my class size is 10 to 1. And so I'm able to differentiate for each student. And so I'm teaching literature right now. And so some of my students are using audiobooks. Some of my students are using Quill and they're working on basic grammar. Other students are really proficient writers. So I'm getting them to level up their writing. And so they're doing writing. Others are working on the arc of a storytelling and a narrative. So they're creating like the Powtoons comics and those kind of things, so that they can show me that they understand the arc of a story. So there's so much technology out there that you can implement so that you, again, you're hitting those, what do I want my student to learn, and how can they demonstrate best that they learned the thing I'm trying to teach them.
Okay, another consideration that I do with my students is their preference. So like I have a student who, you give him a topic, he'll tell you, like he'll say like 10 minutes about that topic, but you give him a Google Doc and open it, he'll do bullet points of just like 5 bullet points. So, you know, if he prefers to talk and say it, we do speech to text. So that's one way for him to show his understanding of the topic. I really like using Google Read and Write. It has a lot of features. You know, you'll hear web pages read aloud, understand, the students could also understand unfamiliar words with it. So I like the vocabulary on that as well. So, yeah.
You know, I'd like to start with that term foundational, because Joseph, you put that in the question. I think that's a really important thing to think about. If we think about special education and we think about the foundation of special education, we have to recognize that special education in the US really is, and we think about the implementation of No Child Left Behind, it's less than 20 years old. 2001, 2004 is really the years that No Child Left Behind was really implemented within the United States. And what did that mean? What, you know, we just throw this NCLB thing down. What does that mean? What it means is that the government held schools responsible for students learning, for students who had disabilities. So at that point, we've gone a little bit beyond, you know, like we have access ramps to be able to get to the building. Okay, we had that beforehand with Americans with Disabilities Act, but now we actually have learning requirements here. And that was actually the first requirement for technology to be implemented within schools as well. And so we think about that, we've gone from ramps and like vision supports with, I don't know, glasses, to now we're up to today with artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And why are those relevant? How do those have to do with teaching? Well, if we take a student who isn't able to access something and we give them access, guess what we just did? We just provided them the tools that they need for learning. So for example, if we're talking about a student who doesn't have physical ability to take a field trip, but we give them that virtual reality where they can see, experience, touch, integrate, and control their environment, they have the ability to learn about whatever that concept is. So we have to be really thoughtful about what do our students need, why do they need it, and really take that and we think about it in terms of, there's another really important relevance here, is their adult transition. I know I have some kindergarten teachers in here and I love you, and you're probably not thinking about high school graduation and college and all of that, but we really should. We really should. starting no later than middle school, we should start by thinking about what do we see the student going into, because we really start to plan for that, and providing them that access to everything gives them opportunities to think about, you know what? I never thought about, I don't know, I'll take something. I never thought about becoming an engineer because I was never exposed to that. Now that you've exposed me to it, now I'm interested. And it doesn't matter what my disability type is. I can become an engineer of a lot of different levels and varieties now that I've been exposed to it. So I think it's essential that we use technology in a way that really gives students an introduction to a range of opportunities.
I think, Lynn, that helps us to transition into this important conversation about the innovations that are occurring in educational technology. And so in this subsequent discussion, this next question I ask, as we observe innovations with artificial intelligence and other powerful tools and resources within EdTech, what strategies, tools, and resources can educators tap into to support students with special needs? And let's talk specifically about planning instruction and delivering student-centered learning. My one caveat here, and Robin, I'm going right to you. I know we in this call are nerds, for lack of a better term, about tools. We love our tools. We can talk about all of the tools and all of the fun activities. Let's help orient this conversation around a strategic use of a variety of tools, helping all of the participants in our call today, in our webinar today, to understand what they need to think about as they contemplate, plan, and strategize the use of these evolving educational innovations through ed technology.
So the first thing I'll say, and I hear this from my candidates a lot, is they're afraid to mess up using the technology in front of the students, because many of the students know technology inside and out, right? And so they're feeling a little bit humble about trying new technology. So that's the first piece of advice. It is so beautiful for our students to see us flounder a little bit, because it keeps us human. And it shows that, hey, we're learning too. And instead of having it be something that you are so afraid of making a mistake, when they get to be leaders in the space, that gives them opportunity to make mistakes too, right? Sometimes they get to be leaders and sometimes they get to make mistakes. So it sets up your classroom for being able to take intellectual risks for everyone and educational risks for everyone. So I do that all the time. I say, okay, I found this cool new tool. I'm going to try it out. Let's see how it goes. And that way, you don't have to worry if it doesn't go well. And we all learn from that. So I would say that was the first thing, is be okay with trying. Sometimes it's going to work great and sometimes it's not. And that's totally okay. And as far as, and that goes into when you're doing your planning and delivering your student-centered learning. If you say, I'm going to try this and see how it goes, and have conversations with your students. That goes to the student-centered piece. I heard from my colleagues here talking about bringing in students' interest of spiders, and knowing that they're really interested in spiders, but having that conversation, because 2 months later, they might not like spiders anymore. And you keep talking about spiders and they don't know why you are. So having the student-centered piece is really the dialogue around that. And you're right, there's so many different pieces of technology that we can use. And thinking about AI and the many platforms that are available, it's not going to replace the communication that we have with our students. It's not going to replace the relationships. It can save us time. It can help us learn to differentiate. So I won't go deep into tools, but so there are tools that you can use that say, I have, this is my learning objective. This is what I'm going to use. I have a student with autism. I have a student who has a reading disability, and I have a student with ADHD. Give me some ideas of how I can differentiate. And that's really useful, but it still takes a special educator who knows their student and understands what good teaching looks like to take those suggestions and put them into your lesson plan. So is that general enough, Joey?
I think if I was going to say, participants, do you want to know some of these tools? And I already see Charlie has said yes. And so other people, if you're interested in knowing these tools, let us know in the chat space so that we can make sure. Oh yes, you can see all of the responses coming in. So let's get those tools in the chat space. And Robin, absolutely. I just want to ask one question before we transition, and I think Jessica wanted to jump in. What is your strategy for integrating this growth mindset and allowing students to believe that it is okay to fail, to not have it go perfectly? And that's, Robin, that is in response to your response, but I open that up to everyone in this call. How are we integrating a mindset that allows this sort of exploratory learning to happen?
It's the relationships. And you have to not just say it's a safe space, but you have to demonstrate it's a safe space. And I'm a Spanish language learner. And so I talk about my struggles with Spanish language very openly. It's a way to humble myself in their presence without overexposing your personal life, right? It's a very safe way to have those conversations. And it has to be every day, all day. And we talk about community, and this is really different in my classrooms. We talk about collaboration, we talk about community. And I am, different than many instructors because we get away from the individualism and the mindset of competition in our classroom. And it's really about collaboration. And this is what it takes to get an inclusive classroom, I believe. Because when you're competing against each other and you have people with different learning styles and different needs, it doesn't create inclusion. What creates inclusion is that we all have different learning styles. We all need different things. I'm going to help everybody understand what they need, and we're going to support each other when you have strengths and I have needs, and we can do that together and lift everybody up. And so it's a mindset shift, but we have to model it. And there, for kids that haven't been in that type of classroom for a long time, they're going to keep looking at you to see whether or not you're really truthful with what you're saying. And they're going to challenge you to see if you mean it. And then once you have the relationship, then it works.
I have to agree with you completely, Robin, about that relationship aspect. Teaching students in high school how to read is a very interesting concept because they have already spent 9+ years of their lives doing something that they've not been successful in and they've hated. And now they've come to high school and all their friends are talking about all these electives that they get to take. They're taking weightlifting, they're taking chorus, they're taking drama, welding, whatever it is. Yeah, but I'm in reading. Yeah. So if we have those relationships and we build that trust and we build that community within our classes, they learn to trust themselves and to trust each other and to take risks and learn to become better students and actually learn to read. I used to create the motivation of, I love you, but I don't want to see you next year here. So please learn to read. And believe it or not, it worked. It was amazing. But I do want to talk a little bit about the tools for a minute. And that is, there are a million tools for everything we want to do, right? And the trick is figuring out what do we want to do and then finding the right tool to go with that. And I think really that's what separates good teachers rather than from just, oh, I learned this new tool, let me use it in my classroom. But for what? Right? So I want you to think about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And this is really relevant for anyone who works in a classroom that might not have access to said resources and technology in our classes. So when we think about Universal Design for Learning, we're looking at, first and foremost, how are we getting students motivated and engaged? That's that engagement piece. What are their interests? What do they like? How do they like to learn? What do they like to do? So that's that first part. And then the second part is related to representation. How are we teaching them? Anytime I taught a book, the very first thing I did was I went and found a commercial for the book, because there's nothing better than having a commercial that interests them, that gets them interested in the book in the first place. Otherwise, why am I reading a book when I don't even know what the book's about? Yeah, you could read the last page or the last back of it, and that's great and everything, but man, give them a commercial that gets them hooked, and that's exciting. So that's that representation. That's really giving them the, how am I teaching it? How am I giving that information? And then last but not least is that action and expression. And that's another area where, again, it's a whole technology thing, but how do we want to allow them? You talked about drawing. how do we want to allow them to show what they know? Do they want to build something? Do they want to build a castle with stones and show the architecture of what things were like during this particular century? Do they want to, use Lego? Oh my God, I love students with Legos because Legos are amazing. Yeah, okay, we're not talking high fancy tools here, but we're talking amazing tools for technology. So think about that for UDL. I want to go ahead and put the website for CAST in this presentation. For those of you who do not have it, this goes directly to a chart for you that is super helpful. It just goes over thinking about engagement, representation, action, and representation. So when you are thinking about what am I doing, what is the purpose, what do my students need, think about UDL, because that really allows you to meet all of your students' needs in your classes and be able to build their interests, think about the instruction and how you're going to teach them and how you're going to assess them on an individual basis. So that's what I think about when I think about technology. There's an unlimited number of tools. We just have to choose the right ones for the right purpose.
Okay. All right, so yeah, there is a lot of tools out there. I know we're talking more about reading and things like that, but there's also behavioral tools. Some tools, the online tool that I know a lot of my candidates like to use is Classroom Dojo. This would help with, for motivating students to have positive positive behaviors. You give target goals, they get those badges and positive reinforcement. So not only is it academic, there's also the behavior tools for them. Yeah.
When we're thinking about behavioral tools, Jessica, I wonder, what do you think about when supporting students with disabilities or diverse learning needs and creating a safe learning environment and integrating maybe social and emotional learning? I'd love to know some of the ways that you approach the selection of technology, Jessica, for specifically that purpose of managing and creating a safe learning environment.
Right, sure. So for social and emotional, I usually start my class with the daily check-ins to make sure that they're doing okay. I use Google Forms for them to fill out, and if there's a section there, how are you feeling today and why are you feeling this way? So if of course there's a red flag, like this is why I'm frustrated, then I'll provide that one-on-one with them. So having those daily check-ins will really help them know that you're caring for them. You're there to see if, building on trust, there goes back to trust, providing them that support for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. As we are sort of coming to the end of this, I encourage panelists, put those tools in the chat space. So Jessica, I heard a couple of great tools, Classroom Dojo, a couple other things that you mentioned. If we could get those in the chat space so that our participants can download and try those in their own classrooms. Robin or Lynn, did you have any final thoughts before we transition with regard to maybe this last point, social and emotional learning and managing and creating a safe learning environment?
I think I already, talked a lot about how we structure the classroom, but setting those norms, doing it together. We, at our school, the students wrote the rules. And so there's a lot more buy-in in the rules. We only have 4, by the way, and this is really interesting. We started with none. And so we just recently had a conversation looking at them again. How many do we really need? And what are the important things? And what does everyone need to feel safe? And again, it's like Jessica was saying, it's that conversation and being able to respect each other. It's not just about what I need to feel safe, but it's about what everybody in the room needs to feel safe. So let's talk about what that looks like. And if there are varying aspects of what it feels like to feel safe in a classroom, how do we work through that so that everybody can have what they need? And then we can dive into the learning, because that safe space is so important, as we know from brain science, right? If we don't feel safe, we can't learn new stuff. So we have to start there.
Thank you. I wanted to also kind of talk a little bit about, you asked about that social emotional environment. And really, when we think about this, artificial intelligence has changed the way we teach because we can meet students where they're at today, right now. So we don't have to make assumptions about, we think we know, we actually know. We know from the data that we have, we know from our observations, we know from our measurements, we know from progress, we know from assessments. And assessments can be adaptive assessments so that they change to meet the student's needs and we can modify them. One of my favorite tools I used for reading was Newsela. Newsela is really cool because you can pull an article. I'm going to go with spiders again. Why am I into spiders tonight? I don't know. I don't like them. So spiders. So let's say I want to pull an article on spiders, and I found an article that is specifically related to spiders in April. And I found this article, and it's a really cool article, but I have students in my class that read at the 6th grade level and at the 4th grade level, at the 2nd grade level, and at the kindergarten. Okay, but I want them to all get the same information. So Newsela is really cool because you can pull the same article with the same general information at different lexile levels, so different reading levels for the students. And then you have the same types of questions with different difficulties so that you can get what you need, but you can also provide the teaching that you want to provide. I know it's not super high tech, it's a website that changes the integration of how sentences are combined and the level of structure of words and those difficulties, but it's really fascinating. It's really beneficial for our students and for our teachers. So just another tool that we can utilize.
Well, and just to make things even more interesting, imagine what you can do with ChatGPT, similar to what Newsela was designed to do. You can put in an article and tell ChatGPT to simplify it, to change the structure, to write you questions at different levels. So folks, use Newsela, try it, and then see what other tools are going to come out next week that could blow Newsela out of the water. And I am so excited as we continue this conversation to be thinking about that. If you're actually interested in learning specifically about artificial intelligence, I'm going to encourage you to take a moment sometime this week and watch the recording of our January webinar, our February webinar, where we talked all about artificial intelligence in the classroom. And you're going to glean some really powerful strategies and steps that you can take to apply and use artificial intelligence in the classroom. And I wonder then, after you've watched it, what you would then do in a classroom supporting students with special needs, students with disabilities, and students with diverse learning needs. What I'd like to do, though, is just take a quick pause as we come to the final question. And I'd like to share with you about our master's degree in education with a focus on special education. Those of you who are current candidates, those of you who are alumni, can simply add on 4 additional modules to our flagship Teach Now program in order to earn a master's degree in education with a focus on special education. You'll study current trends and issues in special education, policies and practices in special education, psychoeducational interventions, and planning methods. Because our master's degree in special education, in this program, you're going to have the opportunity to examine the role of the special educator and accurately identifying students with special needs and using appropriate strategies, services, resources, assistive technologies, and other tools to design goal-oriented instruction and evaluation of students with special needs. As a result of this program, you'll be able to apply best practices and theories to daily instruction. You'll be able to understand the incredibly important laws and policies that govern special education around the world. You're going to be able to apply appropriate psychoeducational interventions for children and youth with special needs. And then importantly, you're going to be able to plan instruction. As I said at the top of our webinar, we prioritize accessibility. So this is a fully accredited online program starting every month in which you will be able to work with a cohort to earn this master's degree in education. If you've got additional questions about our master's degree in education, or simply are interested in learning more and potentially in enrolling, what I'd like to encourage you to do is to join an information session where you'll be able to talk with faculty, candidates, alumni, and representatives of our admissions team to determine how you might be able to leverage this program to advance your career, to serve your students, to learn these technologies and to integrate them in ways that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom. So as we come to the end of this particular discussion, I'd like to bring us home with one final question. And that question has to do with implications. I'd like to thank our panelists for a comprehensive overview of educational technology as it pertains to supporting students with special needs. And so I want you to share with us this final point. Panelists, what are the questions, ideas, or future opportunities you're thinking about as it pertains to educational technology? What do we need as educators to be thinking about as we select and judiciously implement educational technology to support students with disabilities and learning differences in classrooms around the world? Robin, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. So I have lots of thoughts. I'm trying to organize them so it's concise. I think one of the things, and for those of you that go into special education, if you're not there already, you'll understand in time the goal is to keep the bar as high as it can be for that student. And we want to use technology to help them reach their full potential. And there's so many ways that this can happen. We don't want to lower the bar and say this child can't do this, because now my hope, and the way I see technology going so quickly, I think it's going to level the playing field for people with disabilities, both in school and in the workplace as well, because areas where people have challenges, technology is going to be able to do a lot of that for us. And so then this begs a bigger question. We'll have to have another conversation about what is the purpose of education? What is the true purpose of education? And when we think about things that computers are going to be able to do for us, which components of education are still really, really necessary? And how can we use our time with our students to help them build those skills that they're going to need? Because the reality is, for those of you working with kindergarten, so Lynn was saying, like on the call, by the time they transition, we have no idea what the world is going to look like and what their careers are going to look like. So we really need to be mindful about what we're planning them for. And for areas where, again, going back to something that was said earlier, we don't want our students to spend their entire day in the classroom focused on the things that they struggle with and they don't do well. We want them to be able to build their strengths higher and higher and higher as well. And technology can help them do that because it can overcome some of the barriers for them so that they can focus on their successes more as well.
When implementing technology, we just have to remember that we need continuous training. I know, unfortunately, there's some times where we would introduce new tools to students, and then later on down the line, we forget to reteach and reinforce it with them, that they forget how to utilize the tools. So reminding them or training them on how to use it, teachers, para-educators, and everyone else who works with the child, always remember to follow up with them with the trainings. Yeah.
And then Lynn, if you wouldn't mind giving us our closing comment for the day.
Sure, no problem. I think there's a few things I want to kind of talk about. One is, when I think about the potential of what technology can be for our students, and that's students with special needs or all students, it's just unbelievable the amount of opportunity for that individualized, personalized, focused instructional practices that can go way beyond what one teacher can provide 10 students or 30 students, right? I mean, it really is. It's unbelievable. It also allows us to create a safe space. So if a student makes a mistake 1,000 times, they're not making that mistake necessarily in front of their peers or even in front of another human. Someone talked about in the chat a video game. How many times do you play a video game and you don't do it successfully and you keep playing? I'm on level 3,000 of something. I don't want to even admit it, but yes, I am. And guess what? I probably died 10 million times before I got to that level 3,000. So yes, so we have to learn through that. Now, when we think about tools, though, I want you to think about, what do we have? What do we need in order to close the gap for the student with special needs? We don't just throw all the tools on the paper and say that's what we need. We need to identify where the needs are and specifically what tools will close that gap. If the tool is related to something that we don't have a need for, we don't need to implement it, not just because it's a cool tool. Okay, we need to identify specifically and be smart about the ones that we carry on. Our students are going to be exposed to those tools. It's new for them, it's new for you. It takes undertaking for everybody. So let's be very strategic about the selection, implementation, training, thank you, Jessica, of those tools, and retraining constantly of those tools. So that's what I have for everyone. I do want to offer one last thing, and that is, my passion is special education. And if there's questions about the special education curriculum, by all means, please feel free to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to answer questions specifically related to special education curriculum. We all know the program extremely well, but that's what I love. That's my passion. And I'm here for you guys as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for graciously offering to respond to those questions. And I do happen to know that Lynn will provide excellent answers. She knows the program inside and out, upside and down, and it's a fabulous opportunity that connects to the mission of our institution and the reason for which we're all here, equipping, enabling, and empowering teachers. So on behalf of Moreland University, I thank you all so much for participating, for joining us for this past hour to talk about ways that we can leverage educational technology to support students with special needs. I'd like to say a special thank you to Dr. Jessica Blas, to Dr. Robin Harwick, and to Dr. Lynn Beale for being here, to all of our community members in attendance, in particular, our president, Dr. Suzanne Thompson. Thanks for joining us and always being an active participant in our chat. It's great to know that you're with us. And as you see fit and as it has benefited you, I encourage you to share the recording of this webinar with anyone who might benefit from the knowledge that we have together created in this last hour.